I would like to welcome our fabulous presenter today. We have Ms. Maria Esther Linares. She will be sharing with you.
Good morning. My name is Maria Esther Linares, and today I am very pleased to share with you this presentation that is called Widening Students' Horizons with Formative Learning Assessment. I am a teacher of English, as all of you are. I've been in this arena for quite some time. I could say something like 40 years, okay? So I have no experience at all. So I am here to learn from you, okay, and to share information, specifically with this online assessment. Okay. Yeah. Let's start. My first activity is called Curtains Up, and I'm going to show you two scenarios. I want you to read each scenario and then tell me if they are motivating and how good you feel if you were in those scenarios. Scenario number one, you take an online class, you read some web pages, maybe you watch some videos or hear some audio clips, you ponder some study review question, you take a multiple choice test, you receive your score on the test, and the class is over. This could be one scenario, online class. Second scenario, an online class, you meet your fellow students on the dashboard, you read some materials, you find and share some materials as well. You sort of participate in some discussions of course concepts. You take a multiple choice test, you receive the score, and the class is over. I'm going to give you 1 nanosecond, please, to read the two scenarios again and tell me how would you feel if you were taken in scenario 1 or in scenario number 2. I'm going to call this activity putting pen to paper. You putting pen to chat, okay? So use the chat to write your reactions to the scenarios presented above.
Well, we aren't getting anything in the chat right now. I think a lot of people have just said hello to each other. They're recognizing old friends. They're being chatty and social, as teachers always are at conferences.
No problem. Yeah. Rachel, any reactions to the scenario so far?
Well, I can say personally, looking at those, I noticed that they both end the same way with the multiple choice and the automatic grading. But in the first one where you were looking at websites and videos, you even said maybe you're going to look at them. It just feels like someone gave me a menu of activities and then didn't care if I was there.
Okay.
Let's see, in the chat, Julio is saying scenario 2 is a bit more collaborative. Okay, so there's a comment here about in the first one, there's no interaction. So I think those are our comments here that scenario 2 is more collaborative. Scenario 1 doesn't really have any interaction.
Okay. Couple of commentaries. For scenario 1, definitely there is no interaction with the peers. Students don't feel missed if they don't participate. Yeah, they feel fine. There's nothing clear why course is online, except that it's for media elements. Nothing is mentioned. And there could be some potential for immediate feedback. But I think that the assessment format is very limited. Very limited. Yeah. I agree with most people for scenario number 2. It says interaction with peers is great. And that interaction is going to serve as a motivator to continue. Community is likely to develop, like Julio mentioned, collaborative. Students are going to feel involved, important. They are going to share examples, resources, anecdotes. But maybe the assessment format couldn't be aligned with the activities given. So this is something that we need to reflect a bit. The class lacks the closure because it says class is over. That maybe is not the appropriate manner in this case of activities. Yeah. So I'm sure that all of us, we've been through this online classes and we've been in situations, in scenarios 1 or situations 1 or situations number 2. Yeah. Yeah. Having said that, Let's go for assessment and learning, which is important. The course objective, the activities, and the assessment should all be aligned. And this is something that we have just identified in scenarios 1 and number 2. They weren't in most cases, in the both cases. So this is an issue regardless of the medium. If it is a face-to-face class, if it's a clip classroom, or it's an online classroom, the course objective, the activities, and the assessment tools, they need to be aligned. First thing that we need to remember. How are we going to exemplify this? I'm going to give you an example. Maybe it's a very extreme case, but it's important that we identify this one. Yes. Discussion is used as a learning activity. So this is my class today, and I'm going to use a discussion. Students are required to participate, but that participation is going to be noted by how many messages are composed by a student. Yeah. So is that what I really mean by aligning learning objective, assessment, and activities? Does this method is really measuring learning? Discussion is my activity. Pattern of interaction? Yeah, students are supposed to participate. But the assessment, okay, or the rubrics or the scoring system is number of messages that are composed. So this is something that we need to remember every time we plan our learning and assessment sessions. So we need to start by talking about the assessment issue. We can't go further if we haven't really clarified what assessment is. Yeah. One question, something to reflect. Are you an assessment savvy? What is to be an assessment savvy? Are you skilled in gathering accurate information about students' learning? Are you using that information, that evidence, effectively to promote further learning? If you are, okay, maybe these two questions could help you to clarify a little bit. Skill in gathering information, and not only that, but using the information to promote further learning.
So I have a comment here in the chat. It says, we use rubrics. Yeah.
Try. Very good. That's important.
I can tell you, I love gathering information. I love assessment. I think it's that second part that's a little bit harder for me in my practice. Like once you have all this great data, making sure you use it in a timely manner. Okay, we've got some more comments coming in. It says, I believe so, because it is part of the curriculum. So teachers are already into it and perhaps becoming savvy.
Becoming savvy.
Another one that says, I use checklists.
Good.
And Jimmy writes, I use holistic, analytical, and formative assessment. Aurora says
that we are on the right track.
I do have another comment here though, but Aurora says, I do not think so. I assess my students, making them do projects, presentations.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Those are activities. Those are instruments that we use in order to assess our students. Let's move on then. But let's start by defining assessment. What is assessment? The word assess comes from the Latin verb assidere, which means to sit with. To sit with. I'm going to expand this by saying this. And this was mentioned by Green in 1999, but it still is in fashion. In assessment, the teacher, in this case, we are supposed to sit with the learner. It means that what we do with and for the students and not to the students. So have this very much in mind. We sit with the student, we go hand in hand, okay? It's not against the student, it's to help, it's to go with him, it's to accompany in the process. This is a more modern definition from 2019 from Boyd et al. And it says assessment is to gather information. to make judgments which provide the basis for action. Yeah. So the evidence that we're going to get is going to be evidence that is going to help us to call for action. What am I going to do? If my students are not getting this, then this is the evidence that they are not getting this. What is the next thing I have to do? I need to do something. I'm not going to sit down and relax. I'm not going to be looking at them through the screen. I have to do something. Gather information, evidence. And from that evidence, I'm going to make judgments. And this is call for action. Yeah.
There's a comment in the chat. Julio says, assessment is a process. It goes beyond a test or a project.
Perfect. Yeah, it is a process. Definitely, it is a process. What is involved in the assessment process? Okay. Good comment from Julio. The first thing that we need to do is we need to establish the learning outcomes. What do I want to get at the end of the week, at the end of the month, at the end of the semester, school year, etc., etc. Then I need to gather, to analyze, and to interpret the evidence that I'm getting. After I've done that, I need to provide feedback to the students. What can I do if I get the evidence and students don't know their strengths and weaknesses? I need to give feedback to the students, constructive feedback, I mean. Yeah. And then from that evidence and from that call for action, I need to adjust my teaching method and strategy in order to ensure greater student learning. Yeah. So the idea is that we try and complete this process, the learning outcomes, the evidence, but not only to collect the evidence and just put it in a file. No, the idea is that I analyze, I interpret, I reflect. Oh, something needs to be done. Feedback to the students. For the students, the feedback. And what about me? I need to change. I need to adjust things. I need to look for more information. Assessment process. But now, look, it's my other reflective task number 2. Now that we're doing online teaching, because there's no more face-to-face, what about tests? What about assessing online? Are our students completing tests? Are we providing assessing online activities? Please use the chat and tell me.
So we had a comment that came in a couple seconds ago that said, we want to include formative assessment using projects. We want to do it through projects because they imply a process, several steps.
Yeah, okay.
Jacqueline then wrote, we can follow the assessment cycle, plan, do, check, act.
Perfect. Yeah, that's what we need to do. We need to follow the format. We need to follow the cycle.
And Jimmy has written system assessment, institutional assessment.
Institutional assessment. Yeah.
Talking about online assessment, Julio writes, the principles for assessment remain, but it's the approach and the type of tools used that are the ones to be changed.
Yes. Yeah. We're still assessing students. Yeah. Yeah. That's for sure. Often online activities go unassessed. Yeah. So some teachers prefer not to assess those online activities. Okay, that could be one position. Another position is that I think that students are more likely to participate when they know that there is impact on their grade. Even though I teach in school and I always tell my students, I teach literature in school, and I tell my students, okay, the grade is not important. The grade is not important. It's to learn. But I know that they participate more when they know that there is going to be an impact on their grade. This impact could be divided in two ways. The first is direct impact, which is graded on participation, which means quality, quantity, or both, or indirect impact, when the participation is going to be bolster performance on other assessment, which is going to be one way to help me for another type of assessment that I could take. But sometimes the wrong things are assessed. Remember when I gave you the example of a discussion class? So I want to go through that again because this is important. Assessing the quantity of participation, but not the quality. This is going to give a sloppy message. Because, okay, what do I want my students to speak for 5 minutes, to speak for 1 minute? Or what about the quality of the participation that I am going to assess? So things to think about. There are two categories of assessment. Somebody has already mentioned formative assessment. Okay, somebody mentioned projects in formative assessment. Yeah, so formative assessment is what we normally call assessment for learning. And summative assessment is assessment of learning. Yeah. Do we need both? Yes and no. Or do we only need summative, or do we only need formative? Or maybe summative is only for traditional face-to-face sessions, and formative is only used for online assessment. Let's see this. Formative versus summative. Or maybe not versus. Formative and summative. So let's go for formative. Formative is going to help students to learn and practice. When? Throughout the course. Why? Because it is going to identify that there are gaps and we need to improve. Students need to improve learning and we need to improve teaching. Yeah. How? There are different ways that are going to support specific students' needs. We also have summative assessment. Summative assessment is when we assess the student's performance. At the end of the instructional period, we collect evidence of the student's knowledge, the skill, or the proficiency. And at the end, we're going to have something like a learning product or a cumulative assessment. Both important? Yes. Which one are we doing now? Formative or summative? Reflective task number 3. Should you use summative or formative assessment now in this scenario that we're doing online assessment?
Okay, so we're getting some comments here. We have one person has written, it can be both. We have formative mainly. The formative assessments, so because students have the opportunity to keep learning.
Yeah. So summative, formative, both.
We have another comment here. Both of them are important. Its use depends on the objective of the institution.
Yeah, maybe we need to clarify what type of institution we're talking about. Yeah. If we are talking about the school, for example, maybe we go for one one category of assessment, and if we go for a language center, we go for a different one.
Which now people are chiming in on that. So I have one here that says, in my institution, students need a grade, so summative is important. But formative evaluates the process of learning, so it is important too. Let's see, it's important to use both. Formative as well as summative both have to be considered together, and more formative now at school.
From my school teaching experience, I could say that now we need to go for more formative assessment. Formative assessment. In this case, we're going to define formative assessment like this. What is formative assessment? There is all those activities that we teachers undertake and that are going to provide information to be used as feedback to modify the teaching and learning activities in which we are engaged. And that was mentioned by Black and William in 1998. So in schools, we go more for formative assessment. I know that in schools we need the grade. But I'm sure that we could easily give a grade with formative assessment as well as with summative assessment. From your experience, please give me some formative assessment activities that you currently use with your students.
I can tell you one I've used with my students is having them write. I've had them keep an online journal, not like a real journal, but a Google Docs where they just write a couple of sentences at the end of the class. What did you learn today? Or what did you study today? And so then I can see both their writing improve or what needs work with their writing, but then I also see their understanding like along the way after each class.
Okay. Sort of journal.
So we have in the comments here to put, all of a sudden 4 comments came in at once. Let me scroll. Okay. Put true or false to sentences about a passage.
Okay.
To do role plays. Create a role play, a poster, a brochure, evidences, and essay. To introduce yourself in a written and oral way. To give conceptual questions or review questions, a closure activity.
Concept questions, yeah.
Record their voices using the class kick tool. Oh, I don't know that one. Ask my students to record a Voki to comment on what they learned and what they think they need to keep on working on. And completing fill in the blanks. There are a lot of responses there. Sounds like people are using a lot of activities there they want to tell you about.
Oh, yeah, okay.
But Julio wants to remind us that it's one thing is the activity used, but what is the objective of them? He's asking there.
One activity that we could use for formative assessment is the typical live online test. Yeah, not against the test. I think that, okay, depending on the platform that you are using, you could use online tests because this is the way that we are familiarized to assess students. Another thing that sometimes I use is what I call the non-graded quiz, okay? Which are the non-graded quiz? The ones that are going to give me immediate feedback on student learning. First of all, they are not threatening. They are not punitive. So students, my students, they tend to like them. And these non-graded quizzes can be given in a variety of formats. Yeah. Somebody mentioned fill in the blanks. Somebody mentioned, okay, paraphrase it, etc. But they are going to be non-graded. But I am going to collect the evidence, and that evidence is going to help me in order to provide later feedback. Another activity that I sometimes use with my students is what I call, what was your Mari's point today? Yeah, and my students are supposed to write 2 or 3 lines or maybe 2 or 3 ideas, okay, of any point, it could be a grammatical point or it could be skill development, okay, that was muddied for them in that specific way. So they are going to feel free, they use the chat box, and they are going to write down what they learned on what they are still, how could we say, they're still in doubt. Another possibility could be what I call the application cards. Yeah. So the idea is that the students can apply the knowledge from the course to a real world situation. Last class, in my literature class, we were talking about propaganda, okay? My students are reading The Boy in the Striped Pajamas. I teach an IB course. Yeah. So we discuss about what is the difference between propaganda and advertisement, publicity, different things. And then I say, okay, now you need to create your own propaganda. And it was very good, yeah, because after the whole analysis we've done, the students prepare their posters, okay, and they say, oh, this is real world situation. And one group says, I want to do a propaganda for for the next political elections. And it worked fine. And it was very formative. So we moved from the class, okay, from the book that we're reading into a very typical real world situation. Another thing that sometimes I do with my younger kids is what I call true or false. Yeah. And this is from the personal response system, or PRS. I ask my students to use the chat to vote on true or false, or maybe multiple choice question. And this is instant information. This is going to be instant feedback regarding student learning. So I have shown you maybe 2, 3, 4 activities that I've tried with my students and they work. Some of them are for adolescents, some are for maybe primary, upper primary, etc. So this is good. If you still feel that formative assessment, can I use it or not? Yeah, they are easy to work into in most classes. Yeah, so don't feel afraid. They can be pre-planned, or you could create them on the spot when you feel that there is a need to clarify if your students got it or not. So this is something that you could easily do. So don't feel nervous. Oh, what am I going to do? Yeah, formative assessment. The activities that I've shown you today, they are very simple, very easy to prepare. However, okay, if you want to go for tech tools for formative assessment, in the handout, I've given you a list of activities. You could go for one page that is called Go Formative, or Mastery Connect. Another one could be Plicas, PBS Learning Media, Quizalize, which I'm sure everybody uses, or Quizzes, and Socrative. So these 7 pages, okay, they are free. Okay, they are free. So if you want to go deeply into the idea of creating formative assessment instruments, feel free to use them. If you want to go for grammatical structure, if you want to go for maybe developing writing skills or speaking skills, this could be, I'm giving you 7 possibilities that are very easy, to use. But my advice is always, please browse, okay, navigate before you present them to your students. Yeah. So don't go to the class and say, okay, we're going to do this. No, the idea is that we prepare, we get everything ready before the session and things go right. Now you have your activities, the ones that I show, and here you've got a list of activities, of assessment activities, formative assessment. Okay, remember, I am here for formative assessment that you could use. Which are the strategies that we could use? This is for us, teachers. Where am I going? Yeah, first thing. What is my vision of the learning target? Then I need to use examples and models of strong and weak work. I need to show my students outstanding examples and some examples, okay, of work that needs to be polished. They need to be faced with both things, with both sides of the coin. Where am I now? I know what is my learning target, okay? My students have prepared things. They have shown me what they know. I need to offer regular descriptive feedback, but also teach students to self-assess, and they need to set goals. I know that this is a process, so we can start with that in 2nd grade, but maybe in 5th graders in primary, we could start by self-assessment. So prepare your rubrics for self-assessments as well. How am I going to close this gap from the learning target to giving feedback? Design lessons that focus on one aspect of quality at a time, one aspect only. Yes. Teach the students to focus their revision. Students need to know that there is a difference between edit and revise, and help them to identify which is which. Engage students in self-reflection. They need to keep track and they need to share their learning. So if we complete this, this is like the circle that somebody mentioned, okay? Where am I going? Where am I now? And how can I close the gap? Yes. Reflective task number 5. And how could you provide meaningful feedback online? When we were in our traditional face-to-face classes, it was different. But now, how could you provide meaningful feedback online?
Let's see, as we're waiting for those comments to come in, while you were talking, some people said, Elizabeth wrote, those application cards are great and creative. And Jacqueline reminded us all to start step by step.
Step by step, definitely.
All right. So in answer to your reflective task 5, we've got one comment here saying descriptive feedback, questioning feedback.
Descriptive, okay.
Mariana says by using the SWOT, strength, weaknesses, opportunities, and threat. Beatrice says I would do an app if possible. Denora recommends Google Keep. Andrea says I always add a rubric to any task so students have clear descriptions. Aurora kind of agrees with that, with referencing specific knowledge. Have a piece of writing from the students and check it in a collaborative way. Feedback should be linked to students' needs and lesson objective by giving descriptive feedback based on specific evidence. And a reminder here that rubrics and descriptors help a lot.
Yeah, definitely. I go for them. Okay, so feedback. But what is feedback? Feedback is information about how a student has performed in relation to some standard or goal, which is what we normally call the knowledge of result. This is a definition given by Nichol and Milligan in 2006. So it means that first we need to set standard or a goal, and the students need to move towards that. And we need to inform if they have performed well or if they still have some things to polish. This is what we normally call the feedback loop. And if you happen to see here is all our pedagogical goals, the content, the knowledge, the learning, etc. And from here, we need to gather the evidence of learning. That evidence of learning is going to be got through teacher assessment, self-assessment, and peer assessment. But remember what I told you. It's not a question of getting the evidence. It's a question of interpreting the evidence. It's a question of identifying where the gap is. And once I've identified that there is a gap from my target and from what my students are really producing, I need to set the new instructional goals. Students need to know which is the criteria for success, the rubrics. We need to adapt to learning needs. So that's why we need very careful when we socialize the rubrics with the students. Students need to move from their zone of proximal development, scaffolding, and then, they need to move, and this cycle is going to start. So we go from something very theoretical into things more practical, but that involves a lot of reflection before closing the gap. So look, this is sort of feedback that sometimes we write in students' work. Have you ever used these kind of comments or symbols when you were giving your students feedback? I'm sure we all have. Reflective task number 6. Descriptive or evaluative feedback. Here I gave you the two types of feedback.
Well, first off, there were several people saying, yes, they've used these. And now we have one response that says they are descriptive. And someone is acknowledging that, yes, some of them are pretty basic, but they are descriptive. Descriptive and a formative assessment, Annie says. I'm wondering if I would put all of them in the same category, actually. Personally, as I look at them, maybe put them on a spectrum or kind of categorize them differently. The answers coming in are all saying descriptive.
Descriptive,
Oh, we do have one here saying both. It depends on the type of task we are working with.
Yeah, it depends on the type of task. So this is a type of feedback activity. We could have what we call motivational, evaluative, descriptive, and effective. Yeah. According to the gurus, and we are here working more on formative assessment, descriptive and effective is the type of activity that we should work for. Descriptive is to tell the student how to correct their reasoning to improve learning. And effective is ask the student what to do in order to move here. Somebody mentioned the other day in one workshop I attended that one goes more for the ego of the student and the other goes more for the task completion. Yeah. So I think that the type of feedback that you are going to give your students is going to depend on the task that you are asking your students to perform. Sometimes you need to give a very descriptive feedback. Sometimes you simply need something that is very precise and concrete because this is effective. But and it's motivational, I know, as well. Yeah. So why not motivational? It is part of the feedback that we should give our students. Importance of meaningful feedback, because I could give yes a check and maybe that is not effective. Yeah. So students are going to learn faster and more effectively when they are provided with the feedback of their current performance. And not only the feedback, and what they need to do in order to improve. Mentioned by Balaji and Chalabarty in 2010. So it's not a question of giving them a grade. It's not a question of giving them a letter. It's a question of helping them to improve. Remember, we're talking in relation to formative assessment. Formative assessment. And not only formative, but formative online assessment. What is the format that we are going to use? In an online course, feedback can occur in different formats. It could be written, so you in the chat. It could be verbal, okay? You record something, or it could be a video, okay? The format that you use depends on you. Maybe you're going to say, Marisa, but how? How am I going to do it? Well, if you are using a platform, if in your institutions you're using a platform, okay, send the feedback through the platform. If you are not using a platform, you are simply using a Zoom session, okay, then maybe use the breakout rooms and then form groups of twos, okay, pairs or trios, and then send them the feedback. If you are interested in other possibilities, okay, I could give one solution that could be Canvas. There, you could give them. Another one is the Bokaroo, okay, it's important. And maybe last but not least, and I'm sure that you already know it, that is called Jing. Feel free in using the feedback format that you are more familiar with. Sometimes I prefer to write long messages to my students. In other times, I prefer to record, okay, or to video record something for them for the whole class. And that depends. So don't feel that there is only going to be one specific format. You need to feel comfortable with not only with the online assessment format, but also with the online assessment feedback format that you are going to use. This is something to reflect. When a teacher teaches, no matter how well he or she might design a lesson, what a learner learns is completely unpredictable. Learners do not always learn what we teach. That is why the most important assessment does not happen at the end of the learning, which could be the summative. It happens during the learner, when there is still time to do something with the information. So that was mentioned by Dylan William in 2011. And I'm sure that formative assessment, specifically in this time of online classes, this is the one that is going to give us more rewards. It's going to be better successful than the other. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, okay, I will be more than pleased to answer, or you can find me at mlinares@sanantoniodepadua.edu.pe. Thank you very much. Thank you for being with me today.
Well, thank you so much for sharing this. The chat has just been alive with people agreeing and thanking you.
There's a question from Jimmy. Says, must assessment be designed by institution, ministers, or for teachers? Teachers.
So please, minutes, yes.
Yes, Jimmy. Yes, Jimmy.
For example, in Peru, we are working teacher with Aprendo en Casa. And the assessment and the reflectment and the checklist as designed by the minister, by the platform.
Yeah.
So my question is, teacher must design the assessments or the institution? That is, I have another question later. Yes.
From my point of view, it should be designed by the teachers. In this case of Aprendo en Casa, because this is a whole program, I know that behind this platform, Aprendo en Casa, there is a group of teachers, okay? And so I'm going to assume that those teachers are the ones who are preparing the assessment for the program.
I had a question earlier in the chat, and I saved this one. The question was, I wonder how a teacher is going to manage a high volume of formative assessment, which consists of various tasks for big classes, over 200 students, and to provide feedback online. They're saying, imagine if we have 3 tasks for 200 students, that would mean 600 tasks to assess. Do you have advice how to do this without getting burnt out?
Yeah, definitely. Formative assessment is going to work better with smaller groups. I have a group at the university with 35 students, and I still have problems using formative assessment. My group in the school is only 25, which is manageable. Obviously, 200 students is going to be difficult. How are you going to? In that case, in that case, maybe formative assessment is not going to work as successful as in smaller groups.
I have a question for you as well. Is it still worthwhile for the teachers to do formative assessment when their students are having connection issues and you don't know if you will see your students in every session or every week when their attendance might be a little difficult?
I think that if you go for formative assessment, the idea is that no matter connectivity problems, we need to try and go for that. Specifically in the case of providing the feedback, helping them, walking with them in order to achieve the goals.
So I think you can see the chat now, but there's a question there specifically if you would recommend any formative assessment for 7-year-old students who have online lessons. If maybe out of those you listed, is there any 7-year-old friendly?
Yes, 7-year-old students. Yeah, maybe second graders, no? Yeah. So it's a little bit difficult because normally they are in front of a screen for how long? 30 minutes, 35 minutes? Yeah. So one thing that we're implementing in the school is that they finish the class and then they are having like a whiteboard. And in that whiteboard, they are going to show us, giving us a word or something that is not clear, or they take a screenshot of what they've done, etc. Yeah, but we still need to work a little bit more on formative assessment for younger kids, for younger students, 60 minutes in front of the screen? For second graders? No, my kids are only between 35 and 40 minutes, no more. And then they have their break. Jacqueline is asking for what can you suggest for a differentiated assessment? Yeah. In the case of differentiated assessment, yeah. Go for formative assessment as well. Yeah, go for formative. But you need to really identify, okay, which group is the one that really needs that differentiated assessment. Maybe the objective is going to be, the learning objective is going to be the same, but the technique or the instrument is going to be different. Jimmy asks, which is easier to use, holistic or analytical assessment, or both demand time to use? From my experience, when I do speaking activities, I go for holistic. And when I do writing, I do analytical. But sometimes I could go for both. But this is the difference. Holistic for me is more speaking activities, and analytical for writing one, or grammar if you want. Yeah, more mechanics. Just let me know, Rachel, if there are any other.
Those are all the questions I've seen so far. So,
Yeah.
but we have about 50 people in the room right now, and more people will be watching this on the recording.
Yeah.
I don't know if you have any final piece of advice or anything you really want us to make sure we remember coming out of this.
Yeah, something that we need to remember is that assessment is not perfect. First thing. Second thing, teaching and assessment need to go hand in hand. And the third thing, take some time to give your students feedback. Okay, I prefer to go for something descriptive instead of for something very precise. If it is possible. Obviously, if I have 200 students, that is not feasible. But if it is possible, try to write them. That is more personal. And this is what the students want now. We are losing that human contact, and it is important when you write to them. Say, okay, you are doing fine, but maybe we need to work on this, or check this link, etc., etc. Yeah.
Which actually, I want to add on there. I want to make sure everyone knows where to find your handout. If you're watching live, it's pinned up here at the top of the chat. And if you're watching the recording, we have a link to the handout in the video description. The handout has all of those lists of websites that you showed us in the presentation. I want to make sure everyone knows where to find that list. I think I knew about half of the ones on the list. So I'm looking forward to going back and exploring the ones I don't know.
Yes. Okay.
Valuable tools. Thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you, everybody, for attending the presentation. It was a pleasure. Thank you for your questions. It makes me to reflect. I think that my next presentation is going to be on using formative assessment for young learners. I will work on that. That's going to be my research now. Promise.
Well, let me know where you're presenting that. I want to watch that one. I think we have a lot of people in the comments who want to watch that one next.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Rachel.
Well, thank you to everyone for being in here. Thank you so much for taking part of your day, for sharing this information, for sharing those resources, for being here with us together at Re-Evolution.